Hello everyone, and welcome to my tier ranking of John Carpenter films. In a world oversaturated with repetitive, soulless, passionless, assembly line horse shit, I seek to satiate myself at the fountain of creative originality from time to time. And do John Carpenter films fit that bill? Yes sir, the check is in the mail. At first glance, his style looks simplistic, yet is unmistakable to those who grew up enjoying his body of work. His plots are often batshit insane, but highly curious, imaginative, and entertaining. He not only directs, but writes and composes as well. His films are made with passion and love for the craft, and while I know many filmmakers love what they do, no one ever did it quite like John Carpenter. I suppose that's why his name appeared above my head like a light bulb when aspiring to take on a task like this. An opportunity to rewatch a batch of favorites, and a chance to remedy some blind spots across his filmography. Okay, I've just finished watching all 18 of his feature films, and now I'll be reviewing and ranking them one by one for your amusement and mine. So let's get started with his first film back in 1974, Dark Star. I had never seen Dark Star, and any review or ranking I watched prior to making my own seemed to dance around the fact that they hated this movie. I suppose having great admiration for Carpenter's other work makes pissing on his first film somewhat forbidden. Either way, that didn't spell good news for me getting started in my John Carpenter journey. I worried we would be off to a lame start. To my delight, what I felt wasn't boredom or pain. Not entirely. I found myself charmed more than anything, and lured into this unusual interpretation of a space odyssey, although I think space oddity is a more fitting description. The characters fly around in their little spaceship, blowing up planets and constantly dealing with their greatest adversary, boredom. The same adversary I worried I would encounter watching this movie, and halfway through Dark Star, I glimpsed this. Watching Dan O'Bannon argue with a beach ball alien, then spend another 20 minutes trying to capture it, or run from it, I don't even remember, really began to overstay its welcome and lose its amusement fast. So I feel the majority middle section of this movie should have been cut, which may not have originally been there in the first place, given this was originally a student film. A student film which found small financing to add more scenes and pad the runtime. I'll just say this, in a perfect world, keep the extra money, but keep the original runtime. Because both ends of this movie, the first 20 minutes and the last 20 minutes, were among the most amusing and enjoyable parts about Carpenter's entire filmography. Just like the characters are so far away, so are the filmmaking techniques and the look of this movie, so it was a unique experience. When I watch this movie, I feel like I'm looking through a window to a faraway place, and I love that. B tier. Assault on Precinct 13. Assault on Precinct 13 had been on my radar most of my life for two reasons. I like the remake, and I love John Carpenter movies. Why it took this long to get around to this, I suppose I only have one inexcusable answer. Someone once told me they didn't like it and not to bother. That this was one of those cases where the remake was better than the original. While that didn't take it off my watch list, it probably moved it further down on my priority list. So the big question now is, were they right? Well, both movies follow the same premise to varying degrees. In the original, a bunch of pissed-off gangbangers attack a police precinct in retaliation to cops blasting some of their buddies the previous night. Yet, the movie gives us an unnecessary second reason. After a little girl is blasted at an ice cream truck, her dad obviously gets pissed off, chases down the dipshit responsible, and blasts him. But then he runs away, taking refuge in Precinct 13, only to do nothing. Why not help fend off the siege? It's not like they didn't give you a good enough reason. This doesn't make sense to me, even if it would make sense in the real world. In addition, I wish the logistics and strategy of the situation had been more in focus, but that aspect is limited for one side and completely absent from the other. We hear nothing of strategy or planning from the gangbangers, which some would say to the movie's strength, and they might be right. And to answer the question from earlier, Yes, he was right. The remake was better, in the opinion of me and the opinion of my friend. But he wasn't right that the original is unnecessary viewing. The charm, simplicity, ambiguity, atmosphere, music, likable lead characters lended to the enjoyment and charm. You all know what I'm talking about, and this is what earns it in the middle of this tier ranking board. Halloween. For me, there's always been a stigma unfairly attached to the original Halloween because of everything it spawned. Halloween 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Halloween Returns, Halloween Rises, Halloween in Space. This bullshit never ends. Put simply, I've just never been interested. I always just thought of the original Halloween as a mundane run-of-the-mill stab fest, and nothing more. Nothing much different than what it became. But I couldn't have been more wrong. Halloween is an effective movie and a masterclass in creating tension and atmosphere. I almost had to remind myself that John Carpenter wrote, directed, and scored this goddamn thing. And if I was going to call myself a John Carpenter fan, I needed to stop avoiding this classic. Especially this one, given how impactful it was. So, I found myself in the unique circumstance as someone who had virtually never seen the original Halloween. I had caught glimpses maybe, but never gave it my undivided attention and never watched it with the proper conditions. No lights, no distractions, and no mind to the franchise. And after creating these proper conditions for myself and watching the movie, I gotta say, I see what everyone's been talking about. There's no need for me to expand much further on the experience, as I'd imagine everyone watching this is very familiar with Halloween and why it's so effective. The movie is all atmosphere and precise camera work. What could be happening in the background is often more eye-catching than what is happening in the foreground. The Shape, the Killer, Michael Myers, whatever you'd like to call him, is everywhere. That's the power of good movie making. A tier. Why not S? Only because I'm reserving that grade for the ones that are especially special to me. Halloween is flawless in my opinion, but even something perfect may not be fully of my taste. Moving on to John Carpenter's TV movies, I'm only going to discuss these briefly. Someone's Watching Me is also about a creep ass that's following around a girl, and it's actually a really gripping story. The style of Carpenter, his camera work, his framing, all of that is very apparent. The characters, especially the lead actress, is really good. The film lacks John Carpenter's music, and that is a heavy knock against it. This would have fared so much better had John Carpenter composed it. The phone that rings constantly throughout this movie is so annoying. I think this movie is way too beige. I mean, the buildings, the walls, even the wardrobe, all of it is beige. This movie should just be called Someone's Watching Beige. Now, in saying all of this, I don't want to discourage anybody from watching this movie, even though I probably have already done that. Seriously, this is a good movie, and it totally is worth watching. I actually think this TV movie would qualify for a strong B tier on another tier list, but being that this is a ranking of Carpenter films as a Carpenter film, I'm going to have it in C. Moving on to Elvis, this is a John Carpenter, Kurt Russell collab, and the first. I can't rank it because I've never seen it. I've only seen parts of it. This just wasn't available for me to watch anywhere, so, boo-hoo. Moving on to The Fog. Well, this is one where a lot of people are going to piss down my throat because I'm throwing The Fog in D tier. I didn't really care what was even going on. Like, ooh, a long time ago, somebody dissed some pirates or inconvenienced them or like took their treasure by accident or like bumped into their boat. I don't even know or remember or care. And, they just want to like stab people because they're angry about some inconvenience that happened to them back when they were alive. So they come out of the fog. Ooh, the fog rolls in and here comes the pirates. Woo! But you can't see them ever, which is good. They're very silhouetted, which is good. Look, here's what I'll say about it that I liked. Dare I say loved. The atmosphere. The atmosphere is so good. The setting is so good. I know that people really love this. I see it all the time in top fives of Carpenter movies. But at the end of the day, I just felt disconnected from this one to a very large degree. And I'm going to have it in D, Escape from New York. When I watch the opening shot to Escape from New York and see that blackened cityscape, my imagination is captured and runs wild at the same time. Manhattan Island has become the maximum security prison of the United States, where criminals are left to create their own worlds with no hope of ever escaping. And now it's time to send Kurt Russell in there to kick some ass. Why? Well, for reasons I don't really care about, and neither does he. Well, maybe he does, only because his head will explode if he doesn't get in there and rescue the pleasance of the United States and retrieve a tape. So he glides in there and lands atop the World Trade Center. And from this point on, I feel we go from an S-tier movie to a C-tier movie. The city itself looks nothing like New York because it's not. The side characters we meet along the way are underwhelming, and all my imagination keeps offering me are diminishing returns the more and more I see of this place. Because the city itself is not as immersive and imaginative as when we observed it from afar. That's not to say the second half of this movie is bad or boring. It's only to say the setup was too good to fulfill all hopes and expectations. The opening title and score to this film are incredible. John Carpenter's signature style is smeared all over this thing. And with leads like Kurt Russell and Lee Van motherfucking Cleef embodying these comic book style characters, it makes me favor equalizing this into A category rather than B. Despite my gripes with this movie, I still find myself wanting to revisit sometimes, partly to hang out with Snake and Bob, but mainly to observe that dark cityscape and let my mind imagine 1,000 other movies, 1,000 other scenarios taking place just on the other side of the river. Don't we all have the thing at the top? Isn't this your number one? And if it's not, it's like your number two. And if it is your number two, you probably put it at two because you're trying to be fringe. I don't intend to talk about this movie very long before I move on to the next one. And the reason is because anything good that I'm going to say about this movie, you have heard it, and you have heard it, and you know it. You know it. You know every reason why this is an S tier. It's also one of the most rewatchable films ever, because even 4 decades later, here we all are at war with each other in the nicest of ways, trying to figure out what the fuck happened in this movie. I think this is one of the best examples you're ever going to find of a director having attention to detail. Audiences steered away from this because they were obsessed with a fucking movie about some little brat finding a turd in his attic that talks to him and wants this little shit to put him in a basket and fly him home. Alright, enough about that bullshit. Closing thoughts on The Thing. The characters are perfect. The setting is perfect. The tone and atmosphere, perfect. Direction, perfect. Writing, perfect. Music, perfect. Practical effects, perfect. That sounded a lot like Street Fighter, didn't it? K.O. Perfect. And maybe talking like this is considered too hyperbolic, and at this point you're just tired of hearing people review The Thing and basically start glitching while they try to talk because they're just so in love with the movie. It's just a perfect movie. Yeah, I know. I'm one of those people, just like you probably. I start geeking out when I'm talking about this movie, but that's the effect that it has. Anyway, that's The Thing. It's top of S tier. If I made double S tiers, it would certainly be up in there. I used to go over to my uncle's house all the time to watch movies because he had this big-ass TV. And sitting atop that TV was this model car, a 1958 Plymouth Fury, with the color red you'd see painted on your girlfriend's toes. And I asked him about that little model car. He said, "Oh, that car's got a name. Its name is Christine." I said, "Why the fuck does it have a name?" He said, oh, well, it's based off a Stephen King book, and it's about a car that kills people. And I said, oh, okay, that sounds pretty cool. He's like, oh, I know you don't like to read, so if you want to watch, there's a movie. Well, it didn't take long before I watched that movie, and since that day, Christine has always been a favorite. All I've described of this movie so far is a car that kills people, but to sum it up like that does this movie a great disservice, because this is actually a really good fucking movie. It's way better than you think it would be, and has one of my favorite character arcs in any horror movie. It's about this dude with no self-confidence that can't even hold himself up straight, constantly getting bullied at school and at home. His parents seem to be the type to fly helicopters over him constantly. He's very restricted with what he's allowed to do, and his only friend in the world is somehow like this football player guy named Dennis, which looks out for him and drives him around and has a soft spot for him. And all of Arnie's issues with his self-confidence and standing up for himself are solved after he falls in love with a car. So Arnie Cunningham, he really loves this fucking car and he demands to buy it immediately. And the guy selling the car has no problem handing him the keys and giving him a discount because this car is all full of curses. So little Arnie now has this car, and he's obsessed with taking care of it and fixing it up and making it as beautiful as he can. All of the love that Arnie only wishes he received and all the love he's ever had to give are placed into this inanimate object. And we see Arnie's personality rapidly begin to shift. At first, it looks like he's solving all his problems. He stands up straight, he has confidence, he gets the girl he wanted, he doesn't take any shit from anybody, and he starts dressing in a way which totally exemplifies what he feels on the inside. He's become a completely different person, and the transformation is really well done. This car comes first in his life above everything and everybody else. And when people fuck with his car, or fuck with him, that's when supernatural shit starts to happen. And that's just icing on the cake. The most disturbing scene in this film for me is when Arnie starts swearing at his mother and then chokes his dad. It especially disturbs me because his parents look a lot like my parents. This movie also has one of my favorite John Carpenter scores in any of his films. It's just so of the 80s and so fucking cool sounding. I love it. In addition, I really like the supporting characters in this movie. They're really memorable and sometimes even funny. There's just so many elements about Christine that stick the landing for me. I can't help but give it S tier. I think it's earned it. Alright, moving on to Starman. Well, half my audience is about to go bye-bye because I'm throwing this fart knocker in the back of D tier. You're saying to yourself, this is unbelievable. This is one of his best films. This is heartfelt. How can you do this? The movie made me cry. I just don't really fucking give a shit or connect with what's going on here. Like, okay, here's an alien that shows up as an orb, scans Jeff Bridges' picture, becomes Jeff Bridges very graphically and weirdly, and talks weird, walks weird, acts weird. But the movie also demonstrates that this alien is a quick learner, but it can't figure out like how to walk and talk properly. They can't even go into a restaurant without Jeff Bridges like cocking his head around like a fucking pigeon, going like simply trying to like order a steak, like no, A1 steak sauce, and then the whole movie is just like Karen Allen just trying to just drag Jeff Bridges' ass from one place to another while dealing with him without asking any of the proper questions, such as where the fuck are we going? What the fuck are you doing? Why are you acting like this? Why can you not like what are you even doing here? Why are you here? You show up here to my house only to tell me you got to leave. So now I'm responsible for dragging your ass to your spaceship because it can't come pick you up here, even though you showed up here without your spaceship. And it's not like a movie devoid of sense is incapable of being good, but this movie is just like pointless from beginning to end. she's all sad that her husband's dead and going through all this fucking trauma, and then this thing in all its wisdom decides to just like open that wound by showing up as her husband and blathering in her face, da 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 da. Carpenter's getting a bunch of shit, and he's thought of like just as a has-been already at this point. Somebody talks him into doing Starman. They're like, you need to show your soft side. You need to show your magic side. You need to pretend that you're Spielberg for a minute here. Look, listen, if you think it's lost on me or something that Jeff Bridges is like doing interesting things, it is not lost on me. It's just that I don't subscribe so much to just like this thing as a whole. And, you know, maybe you think my reasoning is stupid. If this was written differently, it could have been better. If Jeff Bridges would have came down, just started like murdering people, and Karen Allen had to like control that shit, but she was conflicted because it looks like her husband, then you have like a Carpenter movie. But he comes down, he's all nice, he's all simple. And this is another one that is not composed by Carpenter. He doesn't do the music. Somebody else does, but you know what? And here's where I'm going to start being nice for 5 seconds. The music in this is really good, and it is actually really touching. In the last 15, 20 minutes of this movie, I actually did feel something, and I was actually really happy that I did decide to finish it. So I'm kind of done talking about this now. Let's move on to Big Trouble in Little China. Mother of Christ, holy hell in heaven. Is this a movie that, if anything was stepping into the ring with The Thing, it would be Big Trouble in Little China. This is going in my number 2 spot. It's a total S+ tier. Big Trouble in Little China. Me and this movie, we've grown up together. We hang out together all the time. This is one of the most watchable movies in existence. Everything in Big Trouble in Little China, the fucking sets in this movie are insane. The costumes are insane. The characters are so fucking insane. And then you have Jack Burton, played by Kurt Russell, which is fucking in my top 10 favorite actors ever. And a very fucking memorable role. And he's a total fish out of water. So he's your conduit into all this crazy, zany shit. All the supporting characters are great. Is it a sin for a movie to just be fun? Does it have to have some deeper fucking meaningful message behind it? Okay, this might be a shocker, but the reason I like to watch movies is to be entertained. And if you think this movie is not entertaining, then I would just love for you to comment down below your list of hobbies. I'm sure it's going to be something like watching paint dry or plucking pubic hairs out of your balls that you think are just a little too long. This may not be the kind of movie your film professor shows you in college. It may not be what your mother watched when she was pregnant with you. It may not have won any big-time awards or Oscars, but it's earned itself into the hearts and minds of me and damn near everyone watching this video. Big Trouble in Little China also managed to influence the creation of one of my favorite video game franchises of all time, Mortal Kombat! And no wonder. It was bound to influence someone to create something else awesome. It's a timeless classic, a fun, zany ride that doesn't lose an ounce of amusement or potency no matter how many times you've seen it. This is the kind of movie that's invincible to scrutiny because it's totally self-aware and not trying to do anything more but be a good time, which is impossible not to have while watching this. It's like someone being given a bouncy house full of cocaine and naked 20-year-old women and then saying, "Oh, I didn't think much of that." Prince of Darkness. The premise of this film is bananas. The devil himself is apparently locked inside a giant vat of green goo in the basement of a church, and a group of grad students, professors, and a priest work together to unravel the what the fuckness that is this peculiar container of swirling dark spirited goop. One of the most riveting aspects of this film is the pairing of a theoretical physicist and a priest who use science, religion, theory, and made-up hooky-dooky in order to study and understand that which is impossible to grasp. There's many cool, fresh, and fun ideas going on here, with a lot of nightmare imagery, dope practical effects, astoundingly fascinating ideas, such as portals through mirrors to other worlds, or future telepathic signals being transmitted through dreams. And of course, Carpenter's signature style handles all of this like another easy day at the office. There's times when Prince of Darkness feels like it's losing its way, and just devolving into multiple scenes of splatter and death, but by the end, I felt like I really saw something special. I've tried to keep this review ambiguous because I'm sure someone watching this ranking has never given this a try. I know some wouldn't sing too high a praise of this one, but I do. A tier. They Live. Most of you watching have seen They Live. Most of you know we're all just puppets who've seen the strings. And most of you know They Live belongs in a very high tier for showing us those strings while entertaining us at the same time. If you've never seen They Live, it's about a homeless drifter discovering special sunglasses that allows him to see the real world and the true identity of the inhabitants within that world. There's really no other movie like it, and if you've never seen it, I recommend you stop watching me and start watching that. Then come on back because I want you here. Given the subject matter, finding the right tone for this, I can't tell if it came easy or was thought about very hard, but either way, it walks the line perfectly while juggling chainsaws. If the actors sucked, if the writing sucked, if the filmmakers weren't all on the same page as to what they're doing, this whole thing would have fallen apart into too many pieces to pick up. After all, this movie is about a homeless Duke Nukem finding truth-telling sunglasses, then kicking ass with Keith David after initially kicking Keith David's ass because he refuses to put on the sunglasses and see the alarming truth of our existence. If there's one low-ranking aspect, it's that towards the end, it feels kind of like an arcade shooter, which isn't such an atrocity given the fun tone of the movie, but I especially am not a fan of the unceremonious fate of one of the characters and the hastened wrap-up. I'm glad this movie isn't really long, but I think this one needed another 10 minutes to find a more satisfactory conclusion, but that's just me. So They Live was the final film of John Carpenter in what could be referred to as his golden age. So now we're moving beyond the 80s and into the 90s, and this is where a lot of people will say that Carpenter started to lose his magic touch. Starting with Memoirs of an Invisible Man. I'm watching Clark Griswold here play as an invisible man in a serious, quote, dramatic, quote, role. I'm already very on board with this because I'm curious about Chevy Chase in this role for one thing, and I'm curious about Sam Neill in his role because he's there as an antagonist. And I think what would have made this film way better is if the roles of Chevy Chase and Sam Neill were switched. Sam Neill should have played the invisible man and Chevy Chase should have played the asshole, because behind the scenes, Chevy Chase was the asshole. The only reason Carpenter was able to get through making this fucking schlog was because of Sam Neill. This is a movie that I'm going to have it at the back of B tier. Okay, now moving on to In the Mouth of Madness. Right away, let me tell you this. This movie has the coolest title out of all of them. The movie itself, does it live up to how good the title is? I think it comes pretty goddamn close. Here we have Sam Neill, again, fresh off Jurassic Park. He wasn't too good to return to his buddy John Carpenter and make a film together with him. And so here he is in this role as this asshole-ish, snobby insurance fraud investigator who gets sucked into a portal of weird, wacky what-the-fuckness. Every bit of the way, I am entertained and having a good time. Even Happy Gilmore's fucking grandmother was ruined for me in this movie. If you're one of those people that just likes going through haunted houses on the boardwalk and shit like that, this is a movie that you're probably really going to like. This movie isn't as superficial as just a movie with some booga booga shit in it and that's it. No, there's a lot going on here. Sam Neill is fucking excellent in this. It's maybe one of his best performances ever, if not his best. I think what I'm going to do is rank In the Mouth of Madness straight up middle of A. I gotta say, there are S-tier things about this movie, but as a whole, I can only give it as high as mid-A. It takes your brain on a fucking nightmare trip, and I wouldn't watch this while on mushrooms, but I would watch it at night while stoned, and I did, and I loved it. Village of the Damned. This is a movie that is probably amongst the least talked about of Carpenter's filmography. What I really like about this movie is how it held my interest. because the way it unfolds is very engaging. There's something that happens in this town at the very beginning, and then after it happens, there's another development. And so then ultimately you have, the story revolves around these very weird fucking kids that I actually think do a really good job. This movie was in desperate need of Carpenter scoring it, and thank God that he did, because it really, really elevates the material. The entire time I was watching Village of the Damned, I was intrigued and I was enjoying it. And if you've never seen this movie and you like John Carpenter, which obviously you do or you wouldn't be here, watch this movie. Escape from L.A. I have been looking forward to ranking this one. I'm hitting this one with the top of B tier. I thought this movie was a lot of fucking fun. I thought I was going to hate this movie. And I remember growing up having a distaste for it. The fucking surfing wave, the CGI shark, the fucking basketball court stuff. All of it, I totally get it. But this movie has a really interesting world that it establishes. And I think it's self-aware and it just don't care. The characters that occupy this movie are really good. Even the villain in this movie I find to be even more memorable than Isaac Hayes in Escape from New York. The plot is just like more fun too than Escape from New York. What movies need to do is they need to establish their rules and their universe, and then they need to stay within the boundaries of those laws and those rules. When a movie establishes those things but then steps outside of them, it hurts really badly because it diminishes the integrity of how the movie was making me feel. But if a movie sets itself up as being fucking stupid, then it can just dance around all over the stage and it doesn't matter to me what the fuck it does. Couple last things I'll say about Escape from L.A. that are very important to mention. Number one, the second thing, maybe the most noteworthy thing I've said in this entire video. The ending to Escape from L.A. is the best ending of any one of these films in any movie ever. God, do I fucking love it. Moving on to vampires. Alright, shocker time. This is going in S tier. I'm having it as my third favorite John Carpenter film. This movie, ever since I saw it, maybe when I was, 8 years old, 9 years old, it has stayed with me, and to my delight, it has not lost an ounce. So if there's going to be a movie that just straight up gets to call itself Vampires, this movie deserves it because its vampires, to me, are the best. And then once everything is on full display, you see what kind of universe you're in, and I love it. It's just nasty, it's gnarly, it's violent, it's savage. This movie has really good characters. The star of the show is James Woods, and he plays one of the most memorable assholes in cinema history. He's not trying to be likable, he's just trying to do whatever it takes to get the fucking job done. He doesn't care about anybody's feelings, using tons of profanity and talking down to people. But living in the world that this guy has to deal with, I get it. He has great chemistry with Daniel Baldwin. Along the way in the story, they pick up this other character that's a priest, and this actor's name is Tim Guinea. I mention him here because this actor does not get enough credit in this movie. This guy is one of my favorite characters of all of John Carpenter's characters. The main villain, played by Thomas Ian Griffith, may be my favorite villain of all of John Carpenter's films. He is so scary. I had nightmares of him throughout my whole fucking life. People don't like this movie. I'd be interested in the comments section as to what turns you off about this movie. Maybe it is just too nasty and characters are just like unlikable. And it's just a bunch of vampires and a bunch of blood. You know, it's way more than that to me. I think this movie is very unsettling. It's very atmospheric. Everything is underscored brilliantly with an amazing composition and theme. The tone, the setting. This is like a Western vampire slayer movie. It absolutely qualifies for S tier, and I don't have to think about that at all. Moving on to Ghosts of Mars. Okay. Usually it's in last place. So I remember when I was a kid growing up, I actually watched this movie a lot. And I think what drew me to it is it had that same caliber of violence that we got in Vampires. What's happening with these ghosts of Mars? It's basically like an infection. Just this red mist that floats around, possesses people, and makes them start acting crazy. I mean, we've seen things kind of like that before, but what elevates this movie for me, I think there are parts of Ghosts of Mars that are atmospheric, unsettling, creepy, and I like some of the blood and gore effects. And I, on occasion, like some of the action sequences, but they get a little too Resident Evil style for me, that it just sort of kills the grounded nature of them. But I also like how characters are so unceremoniously taken out throughout this movie. They'll just suddenly get hit in the head with a flying buzzsaw. Watching this with somebody else that likes the same degenerate garbage as you will do you a lot of favors more than watching it yourself. It's devoid completely of charm, and it has like no movie magic about it. The setting itself kind of just looks like a big set. What this movie should have been was the third Snake Plissken movie. This should have been Escape from Mars. Because with the zany, crazy, wacky shit going on in this, they might as well have taken the same Snake Plissken from Escape from L.A. and shoved his ass right in this movie, and then I don't give a shit what happens. Alright, and then finally The Ward. Just going to throw it in F tier, and I'm barely going to say anything about it. I just didn't care. Didn't like any of the characters. I didn't like the setting. Didn't care about the story. Just wanted it to be over. Checked my watch 1,000 times. Checked my texts and emails 1,000 times. Yeah, I don't even know if Carpenter even bothered to really actually direct this at all, or if he just was in the room sometimes just telling, like, film students, like, oh, yeah, you're doing a good job. I'm going to get some coffee, and then just disappearing. And that's it. So, everybody, that's my ranking of John Carpenter's films. I hope you enjoyed this, and I would love to hear your thoughts about my ranking here, and I would love to know your ranking down in the comments below. Just the fact that you were here and took the time to just chill out with me and listen to my words and my rambles and my rankings, it means a lot to me, and I'm really happy for each and every one of you that were here. Even if you disagree with it, even if this list is upside down from where yours would be. Well, if you have The Ward at the top, kiss my ass. You're crazy. And the thing at the bottom, fuck you. Anyway, I know we all have different opinions, but that's the spice of life, right? Okay, guys. So, once again, thanks for being here, and wherever you are, whatever time it is, I hope you're having a wonderful day or night.